Welcome to the Institute of Policy Studies. We are privileged to welcome Dr. Premachandra Athukorala. Dr. Athukorala is a Professor of Economics at the Arndt Gordon Department of Economics of the Crawford School of Public Policy at the Australia National University. Dr. Athukorala, welcome to the Institute of Policy Studies. Doctor, you presented about global production sharing, and that was your title of and its implications. How would we start with, how do you explain what global production sharing is?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. I think the best way to explain this would be to start with an example. Think about the Apple iPhone you are using. The design and marketing of iPhone is done by Apple Corporation in the US, and you had a feeling that this is an Apple product coming from the US. But in reality, the entire production of all Apple products, including iPhone, iPad, is done in China by a Taiwanese multinational called Foxconn. That's not the end of the story. China does not produce all the components and parts in order to assemble the iPhone. These components come from at least 10 other countries, including Japan, Korea, Taiwan, US, Malaysia, and so on. Based on that example, I can define global production sharing as internationalization of the production process of a given product in which number of countries take part in the production process. In other words, most of the goods nowadays are not produced entirely within the national boundaries of a given country. I can simply say that these products are made in the world, not in the US in this particular case.
So it's a disaggregation of the production.
And then shifting these segments into different countries. Right.
And how would you say this is relevant to Sri Lanka?
Now, at present, one of the biggest emphasis of Sri Lankan policymakers is to promote our exports. Then we need to focus on production, areas of production in which we have comparative advantage. At the same time, these products have wider domestic market. According to my research, the most rapidly growing segment of world manufacturing trade is trade in part and components and final assembly. I would call it GNP, Global Production Network Trade. This trade accounts for more than half of world manufacturing exports and closer to 2/3 of manufacturing export from developing countries. If you want to promote manufacturing export, we need to get into these areas. And again, if I look at our history, particularly after the policy reforms in 1977, actually big multinationals involved in electronic trade showed their interest in coming to Sri Lanka to produce certain components for their production within global production network. And we lost that opportunity of keeping big multinational like Motorola or Harris Corporation, which came here to begin with, mainly because of political instability and lack of policy certainty. But even in that context, there have been a number of medium-range companies which have been producing within global production network. Let me give you two examples. There's a company called Lanka Harness Limited, situated in Biagama Free Trade Zone. They are not producing cars, but they are producing a tiny component for automobile. That is sensor switches for seat belts and airbags. They started supplying Toyota, now they are supplying American and the German automobile companies. And now this company is 12 years ago, employee over 300 workers, and then annual turnover is about $35 million. That's another interesting story about a company which came to Sri Lanka very recently and located somewhere in Kadawat area called Aerosensors. It produces, you won't believe, component for Airbus.
And
We have opportunities.
right.
Yeah.
It's quite clear that Sri Lanka has a lot of opportunities to get
Yeah.
involved in GPNs, global
Right.
production networks.
Yeah.
What can Sri Lanka do better to join these GPNs going into the future?
Yeah, it's very interesting question. I think I need a lot of time to explain. But there's a misconception in Sri Lanka. We can't get into global production network because our wages are high. Wages have been increasing. It is true that from historical point of view, our wages are increasing. Say about 30 years ago, a factory worker would have earned about $28, $30. Now it has increased to about 150, 200. But do not forget the fact that our factory worker wage is still about 1/20th of a factory worker's wage in the US or Germany or Japan. Then what is needed is to meet other preconditions. What are the other preconditions? You need not only cheap labor, but trainable labor and supervisory manpower to complement unskilled workers. I think at the moment we have that we can meet this requirement. Our workers are trainable. There's a proven record of our workers doing well in assembly factories. And again, we have human capital. Of course, over the time there can be scarcity, but it is indigenous to the process. Skill development will occur. But the second most important factor is the reducing the cost involved in linking production activities undertaken by these companies in Sri Lanka to their global production network. In economics, this is called services link cost. Service link cost. Service link cost is very important simply because if a particular segment of the production process become costly or get interrupted because of political instability or something, it can erase the profitability of entire production system. Therefore, multinationals are very concerned about services link cost. Now, service link cost is determined by number of factors. Firstly, trade-related infrastructure, not only road, but custom facilities, import approval procedure, and so on. Secondly, property right protection, including enforcement of contracts, because technological secrecy is very important for multinationals involved in global production network. If their technology get leaked to local companies quickly, they may not want to come here. But I think our intellectual property protection regime is not that bad. Third factor is very important thing, political stability and policy certainty. The two multinationals which came to Sri Lanka, the big multinational, Motorola came here to set up a plant with an initial employment of about 3,000 workers. Harris Corporation came here to set up a plant with about 2,000 workers. Imagine they remain in Sri Lanka. The main reason they left was political instability in the early 80s and policy uncertainty. And otherwise they would have remained in this country. And then another requirement is a liberal trade and foreign investment policy regime. These companies want to import required part and component very effectively, swiftly. At the same time, multinationals are key players. Now, even in the middle level companies operating in Sri Lanka, only one of the partners is a foreign company. Right? Therefore, the investment policy regime has to be very transparent, and there shouldn't be restrictions in the improving investment, and the time involved in processing applications have to be very short. All these preconditions are needed.
Speaking of having a liberal trade policy and speaking of
Right.
cost as well,
Yeah.
Sri Lanka is notoriously home to a very complicated and high tariff regime, particularly with para-tariffs
Yeah.
being involved to a variety of sectors in Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
How does this complicated tariff structure inhibit Sri Lanka's participation in global production?
And related to that point, actually the situation is not that bad as you have assumed, right? As part of setting up free trade zones in the late 70s and subsequent reform, our trade regime has become very liberal. I think we have one of the most liberal trade regimes in this region. And more importantly, export-oriented firms, like firms involved in this assembly process, have the ability to import everything duty-free. And our custom procedures are also not very bad. But the problem lies on the import side. We need to look at import side as well, because we are importing product produced within global production network. According to my estimate, I think about 2/3 of the products we import are somehow related to global production network. Now, there are a cascading tariff structure, as you said. Cascading means very low or zero tariff for intermediate goods, but high tariff for final assembly. In that context, actually, global production network related import can work against the revenue raising objective of the government. Imagine the government imposes high tariff on a final product. Then traders or the manufacturers have the ability of breaking into separate segments and bringing the segment duty free to the country, and then the assembled product. Then you lose tariff revenue. Then my description of the idea is that with global production sharing expanding, I think there's a strong case for uniform low duties. And then it avoids doing this, getting into these malpractices. And the revenue will increase, custom procedures will become more efficient. And
So you don't necessarily have to create a separate industry, so to speak, but establish the processes
yeah.
to have, for example, component assembly.
Yeah,
and then
you make
the knock-on effects of that.
You make an enable environment for firms to come and benefit from your labor resources and other preconditions required for joining global production network. And again, as I mentioned you, at a small scale, it has been happening in Sri Lanka over the last 30 years. It would have happened in a much bigger way if Motorola and Harris Corporation remained here. Because in electronic and electrical industry, you have what you call herd mentality. If a big player comes, others follow suit. That's what happened in Penang, Malaysia, and we missed that opportunity.
And thank you very much, Prof. Athukorala. I would like to thank Prof. Athukorala for your valuable insight, particularly with the presentations, as well as with this brief discussion. Thank you very much for joining us. You can always join us further with similar insights at ips.lk.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.